So welcome everybody to Hockey Night in Canada. My name is Greg Newton and I am not in Canada. I am in New York City. I'm the co-founder with my partner, Donnie Jokum of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. And I am inside the Bureau, our lovely little store, inside Manhattan's LGBT Community Center on West 13th Street. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I want to say a special thanks to Ted Kerr for helping to put this event together. And Ted's just been a wonderful supporter from the beginning. And before we get started, I want to say that right now you're all muted, but I will undo that later so that you can ask questions when we do a Q&A at the end. Of course, you can also use the chat function. And I wanted to also point out that Berend McKenzie's story is inside of Between Certain Death and a Possible Future, edited by Matilda Bernstein Sycamore, who I believe is in our audience. Thank you, Matilda, for making this happen, the book that is. And you can get that on our online store. I'll share that link in the chat function right now. And let's get started. So I'm turning it over to Christy Harcourt and she will take it from here. So please put your hands together very visibly on the screen so we have a warm welcome for her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg, and the center. We're so grateful to be hosted by you tonight. I'm Christy Harcourt. I'm a social worker and writer, and also a big fan of Ted Kerr, located in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I had some really beautifully timed internet issues, so I'm on my phone today. So if you see me poking you, it's not personal. And I'm just so thrilled tonight to present these two creative and smart and challenging writers and to talk about their work with you. So I'll introduce them. Berend McKenzie, who uses he, she, and they pronouns interchangeably, is a person living in Treaty 6 in Edmonton, Alberta. Berend is an award-winning playwright, producer, actor, screenwriter, and published author, known for unflinching first-person writing and drawing from their own lived experiences as a Black mixed-race Canadian. I have had the pleasure of working with Berend over a number of years, partly through the Loud and Queer Cabaret here in Edmonton, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to enjoy this work in this beautiful anthology and to hear about Berend's work tonight. We're also joined by a new friend, Francisco Ibanez Carrasco, has a rags to somewhat riches story, starting with migrating from Chile from poverty and military dictatorship to 1985 Canada at 22 years old, getting diagnosed with HIV in 1986, becoming an AIDS activist in 89, and pursuing a thrilling combo of community work and qualitative social behavioral research. Nothing so thrilling as the latter, I'm sure. Currently, Francisco is an assistant professor at the Doula Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. His memoir, Giving It Raw, was published in 2015 by Transgress Press. And just this week on World AIDS Day, Francisco was presented with a Pause Toronto Award from Pause Planet magazine for his work to fight HIV stigma. So let us congratulate you on this recent recognition, Francisco. It's wonderful. So this story of Hockey Night in Canada is so many different things to different people. And I'm curious, just in the chat, if people would let us know where they are coming from. So if you are in Canada, and actually wherever you are, where are you? Because one of the things that we were thinking about as we were planning this event was wondering whether, because we're hosted by this beautiful New York organization, whether we would, who we would be speaking with tonight. And so this is lovely. Thank you everybody for taking part in the chat and letting us know where you're from. And hello to familiar friends. I want to mention there is another kind of organizational wing of this event tonight, which is a collective called What Would an HIV Doula Do? And something that several of us are members of, and several in the audience. What Would an HIV Doula Do asks, is a collective born of questions. Our title is a question, and also we think in our work about the idea that people don't start their relationship with HIV alone, and so they shouldn't need to live their lives with HIV alone, that there should be community and activism and support and care. And What Would an HIV Doula Do supports this question asking and the work of community building and care from all across North America. Okay, wonderful. So let's start with the mystery of these two stories. There were two stories set in the 90s, published at different times, both with the same title. So I'm wondering, Berend, do you want to let us know how you learned about your story having a twin?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Christy. And I just want to say some thank yous for people showing up. It means a lot. So thank you first to What Would an HIV Doula Do for putting this together. And Ted Kerr, you've been freaking amazing. The Bureau of General Service Queer Division, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this. It means a lot. To Christy, Juan, Francisco, thank you for allowing us to get to know your writing in a bigger way. And I'm so honored to share this night with you. And I would also, and Matilda, for all the doors you've opened for me over the last year since publishing this book. I'd also like to send a special shout out to my newly found, long lost sister, Michelle, and her husband, Pierre. Love you. Love you. You look fabulous. Okay, so that's enough of that. How did this? So I have had this idea. I knew if I survived the early '90s and survived AIDS back then, I had hoped, like, the night that I write about was so crazily. It was so crazy. You could have made this up, and I knew that when I saw the submission for Between Certain Death and a Possible Future, that I wanted to write this story down, because I told people about how crazy that night was, but I'd never written it. And so I had the title for a long time. I wanted to call it Hockey Night in Canada because it literally happened the night of July, what was it? It would happen in July. It was the first hockey riots in Vancouver, and we got caught in the hockey riot. So I started writing the story, and then I got an email from Ted just as it was going to print, just after I had given the okay to everything, and Ted was like, Berend, did you see that there's another story by a Vancouver queer writer called Hockey Night in Canada? And I literally had a meltdown. Anybody that knows me knows that I have epic meltdowns. And I was like, I phoned Matilda and I sent her messages. Maybe I need to change the thing, and the world is ruined and it's all over. And I had a talk with Ted, and Ted had the fabulous idea of, why don't you guys put together this? Why don't you both each read and give each other space to tell your stories? So, and how this came about. And now for me, it's like one of the best, happiest accidents that could have possibly happened. So that was my very long answer.
Wonderful. And Francisco, from your perspective, tell us about this discovery.
Well, the night. Thank you. I echo sincerely all the thanks to everyone. I know how simple it seems to put together online events, but it's not. And so, thank you very much for the invitation. And to many of my friends who are in the sitting in front of their monitors. Thank you. I miss you all. I haven't seen some of you for a while. So the night that Berend was caught in the riots, at that time I was living with AIDS more than HIV. I was in the emergency room at St. Paul's Hospital, which is in Burrard Street in Vancouver, where I lived for 24 years. And so I was drugged on something, probably morphine or something like that, because of pain. But I remember vividly, because everybody got really alarmed, the nurses and doctors alike, and the patients, of course, because the doors, it's an old hospital, so there were these old doors to the outside started to be banged, and you could see them swaying. So that's what happened that night. But the story, I wrote it way before, when I was young, and I happened to have a hookup with a hockey player from Alberta who will remain unnamed the rest of their life. And, I wrote this collection of stories about hard decisions about living with HIV at the times, heightened times of the plague. So the protagonist in disguise is me, and the rest, well, you'll hear it in a little while. So I love hockey because I'm very patriarchal and old-fashioned. I grew up in a dictatorship, so I love men and violence and sweat and cursing and men who don't have teeth, and that's the kind of men I've always been kind of attracted to. So why not write a story about that? And the story is written in Spanglish, which reminds me, saludos, si hay alguien en la audiencia que habla español. So saludos para mis hermanas y hermanos Latinx. So yeah, that was Christy. Thanks for the question.
I'm afraid that our captioning is going to be, I think, baffled by language, but so we'll just know that that is the case. Thank you so
It
much.
cannot be baffled. There are 40 million Latinos living in the United States. How can that be baffling? Sorry.
I agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I maybe what we'll do is go into the readings, and then I've got so many questions that I want to ask, and I know that the viewers will also. Does either of you prefer to read first?
Oh, I'll read.
Oh, lovely.
Why not? So, the very un-Canadian of me. Sorry, but when I'm with my sisters and brothers from the States, I've taught in the States, so I like the directness. Okay, so folks, so as I foreshadowed before, I wrote about this really serendipitous encounter between a gorgeous closeted hockey player from Alberta and this Latino immigrant who really, as someone had told him at that time, had come to Canada to die of AIDS, right? Because that's what poor people do. And so the story originally is from the 90s, and the protagonist, who is the Latino living with AIDS, is very frail, doesn't go out much out of his subsidized apartment, but it says, I like Vancouver because of its winter and the slow evenings that seep into the night. I love the mossy gutters that collect interminable tears of the season. In the winter I can shelter from public view. He has Kaposi sarcoma. Cocooned, mesmerized by the litany of raindrops. In the winter I dream. I go surfing through the channels, sometimes stopping in the soothing pools of blue screen. Click, click, drop, drop, click. Remember, at that time we had no internet like we have now, right? It was much slower. I used to watch the soaps, but now I prefer to watch hockey games. And my personal favorite, sports news and the interviews with the hockey players. I relish those delicious square heads on the 6 o'clock news trampling through a humid locker room, stocky and barrel-chested, sweating buckets. When the camera zooms in for a violent close-up, I can almost taste the salt dripping down the sideburns and through the evening beard stubble. Athletes, artists, and politicians talk game without making any sense at all. Who cares? Their features transfix me. And so what happens is that night he decides, well, I'm going to go out, and he went to a dive, of course, where he would be less conspicuous because of his lesions. And it so happens in the story that the closeted hockey player, that mounted man, goes there as well because he won't be recognized. And so they sit in the bar. By pure coincidence, really, the hockey player gets so drunk and gets somehow dropped in the lap of this Latino queen, right? Nobody else wanted to help, and so he ends up taking him in a taxi, and they ended up at a subsidized apartment. And of course, like any good man would do, he freaks out. I've been with a lot of straight men. They freak out, after, when they start things, and they freak out. And so he gets very violent with this poor, lonely AIDS queen. And, but this is what happens. Sort of towards the end. It's Saturday evening. It's dark, darker than usual. Everything is messed up. The lamp by the bed has been knocked over. The pillows are drenched. The sharp smell hangs in the air, and time has paused. I've got a shiner, a black eye that hurts like hell, and my left arm is bruised and strained. On the corner of my bed, sheets torn up, the only sheets he had, by the way, mattress exposed, not the best mattress. The red-haired ones, that's a hockey player, a red hair, trouble. The red-haired one pans in a halftime mode. In fact, he's been able to get the game going. He's played defense. Oddly, I seem to be showing a great form. My stick is up, my ass intact. Can I take any more of this thrashing? The porn tape, remember VHS, has rolled to the glorious money shot end and rewinds automatically. But when that happens, when it fully rewinds, the VCR turns off and the TV turns on. Hockey Night Canada is on CBC. Score! Unexpectedly, he abandons the idea of killing me slowly by punching me, dismembering me, and twisting my arms. Thanks for the short attention of the young. Still naked, he leans forward, so fast forward, his lovely nose almost touches the screen. The nose has been broken twice, but I just learned that after in a TV biography. That's another story. He's transported my mental thanks to the rich and charitable queens who handed down their 2-year-old VCR to me. Gracias, girls. I will never talk shit about you again. I promise. I turn it up loud, so loud we can hear the rush of the blaze scoring the eyes, the sweat, the saliva, and blood hitting the boards over the agitated screams of the commentators. Yes, it's a hockey pipe. A half-bubble moon pregnant with radiance surfaces in my bed. His ass is on my face. I approach his moon ass with the greed of a child anticipating an ice cream cone. When I first wade in there, the muscles stiffen. Straight men do that. And the moist ring recoils. But he does not flinch or turn or move. Inside his bowl, at the core of this steroidal fruit, there's a moisture and warmth. I lap it up. I hesitate, but I do not withdraw my lips. This is so 1970s, I thought. I can't believe I'm into this. The sweet smell and the delicate taste cast away inopportune thoughts of tropical parasites, namely Cryptosporidium. We had a lot of that. I'm a tourist and I want to eat the sidewalk vendor stands. I want to eat raw fish. I want a mouthful from the cracked fruit. I want to ride in fast cars without seat belts again. If they could see me now, those smarmy, I'm clean and safe queens from the phone lines. There were phone lines. The ones who leave skid marks when they get a glance at my lesions. Wait a second. The hockey player's turning over. Withdrawing, no. He's moaning a quiet moan as the Canadian team takes a beating 6-2 from the Americans. This ruffles my fledgling national feathers and it calls for revenge. Open up. open up, leave your net unattended. He does, and my serpent tongue Quetzalcoatl for the Mexicans. Go deep looking for the seeds of this carnivorous flower blooming under my kisses and bites. Viva la Malinche, you know, la Malinche seduced Cortez and sold the empire to him. But who the fuck cares? La Malinche guerrillera revolucionaria now marches on, slowly climbing, tongue-in-cheek, licking, kissing the great slope of his back, the gargantuan spine, climbing each disc to the soft nape of his strong neck. I'd not seen a lot of necks at that time, really. But this neck looks good. I bite and my hands grab onto 100 grade A Alberta beef. I can say that again. I've reached the top. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you so much, my friend. This is from Hockey Night in Canada. There's so many questions. But let's go next to Berend, and then we will. Berend McKenzie, will you please read to us from your story, Hockey Night in Canada?
I sure will, Christy. Thank you, Francisco. That was awesome. So this is from Hockey Night in Canada. Edmonton, 1984. I am underage and working in the gay bars. Randy is a waiter. I am a busboy. Randy is bearded and into leather. I am small and effeminate. I'm told I look like a girl. He has a laugh that fills the room and his eyes dance with mischief as he chases men around the bar. Randy is always having sex, and I am jealous because it isn't ever with me. Randy gives me a key to his apartment, so I always have a place to go. He sleeps in and I clean up while watching soap operas and the Oprah Winfrey Show. One day I hear Oprah talking about the gay cancer. Her guest is a man with purple marks on his face. You are going to die of that. I push the thought out of my head and take the dirty dishes to the kitchen. One day, Randy asked me to meet him at his favorite restaurant at 4 p.m. He has to tell me something. He is drunk and has been crying. I have it, the cancer, the gay fucking cancer. As he speaks, I can see the same purple blemish on his temple that the guy on Oprah had. I reach across the table and grab his hands. He cries and drinks until he is falling out of his chair. I ask for the check and I take him home. The next day, he is up early. He is cheerful and resolute, like nothing is wrong. I need you to take care of the cats. I'm going to travel. New York, San Fran, and Boston. I'm calling it my Screw You Tour. I'm going to fuck my way across America and give it to everyone that gave it to me. I am left alone in his apartment for a month. I am lonely and depressed. It all starts to sink in. He is going to die soon. I can hear it in his voice. Every time he calls, he sounds weaker. I can feel the walls closing in on me. Everyone I know and care about is getting sick. Randy phones me late one night and wasted. I'm coming home. I'm ready. I light candles in the bedroom and change the sheets on his bed. Randy looks so different from the man who left a month ago. He has lost most of his body fat and his face looks like a wooden puppet. The purple splotches are everywhere. I sit him on the bed and take his hand in mine. Sleep with me. Have sex with me so I can die with you. His eyes flash with rage. Spit flies out of his mouth as he screams inches from my face. You selfish fuck. You have everything going for you. Look at me. Look at my face. I'm covered in fucking lesions. You are pristine and young and smart and beautiful. Where do you get off asking me to kill you? Get out. Get out of my fucking house. He kicks me out of his apartment and refuses to see me again. I am bussing tables at the bar when one of Randy's fuck buddies tells me that he is dead. I am 16 years old. Vancouver, 1994. The lesions on my legs keep moving up. The sores cover my feet from the tips of my toes to just above my ankles and show no signs of stopping. I have nerve damage and my feet are hypersensitive to the touch. Even a bed sheet brushing against them makes me scream out in agony. The specialist says, this is because the AIDS virus has nowhere to go, so it is settling in my extremities, feet first, hands later. His main concern is to control the pain and stop the spread of the lesions. If he can't, they may have to consider amputation. I have been placed on a number of pain pills, but have built up a resistance to them. Now I am on liquid morphine, which I can administer myself every 4 hours through a shunt in my arm. The doctors don't know about my addictions: cocaine, alcohol, sleeping pills, anti-anxiety medications, Valium, morphine, Dilaudid, Neocitrin. My trips to the doctor are exhausting and I get into bed as soon as I arrive home. The ringing phone jolts me out of my sleep. I hear a tired voice on the other end. It's time. Tom is whispering. He doesn't want to wake up Billy Boy's mom, dad, and brother who arrived yesterday. Billy Boy's family disowned him after he came out of the closet. They just showed up out of the blue when they heard he didn't have much time left. Tom is an angel who stepped in to help when Billy Boy needed care. They met in Edmonton and moved out to Vancouver together when they were teenagers in the early 80s. Tom and I dated the same man at separate times. We became fast friends. If you want to say goodbye, now is the time. The doctor says he won't make it through the night. The guys will pick you up in about an hour. I hear noises in the background that sound like an animal moaning. Tom says he has to go and hangs up the phone. My pain right now is really bad and I have to get it under control before Sandy and the other guys pick me up. I hate taking this drug with me everywhere I go, so I load up my syringe with extra cc's of morphine and push it through the shunt. I pack a flap of leftover cocaine in case I need to take the edge off, and I wait. I examine my bloodshot eyes in Billy Boy's bathroom mirror. I wipe the last remnants of cocaine off the tip of my nose. I look like shit. The familiar feeling of numbness mixed with stinging in my feet is starting to return, which means the last hit of morphine is wearing off. I should have brought some with me. Hopefully I won't be here too much longer. I open the bathroom door and I see three factions. In one corner of the living room, Billy Boy's family sits watching the hockey game. At the opposite end and squished into the dining room are 15 of his closest friends, ranging from my age to the respected old guards of our community, the gaggle of gays. In the middle of the living room, separating good and evil, lies Billy Boy, moaning in a hide-a-bed. We've been here for hours. The doctor said he would be dead soon, but Billy Boy is being stubborn as usual. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I'm trying to think about where I want to start here. Maybe this is maybe a place to thinking about the time that these stories came out in the 1990s. One thing that I was struck by when I read the stories was the presence of lesions and the deep visibility of lesions. And one thing when I was looking up sort of what was happening in the popular culture around the time of Berend's story, particularly because it's set in such a specific time, was I learned that in 1993 was the year that Angels in America won the Tony, and that the movie Philadelphia opened. The movie Philadelphia, if you haven't seen it recently, uses lesions as a sort of a shocking reveal about the nature of illness. It also gives us the idea that somehow in the gigantic city of Philadelphia, a well-connected gay man has to rely on the only available lawyer, which is a homophobic straight man. The movie ends up really being about the transformation of the straight man. And so as I was thinking about the images that we might have been seeing at the times that these came out, one thing that I was thinking about was the contrast, maybe starting with Berend, the contrast between the some media images that showed supportive families rallying around their children. And Ted Kerr, who's here, has done some really brilliant work about the very famous image of David Kirby surrounded by his family on his deathbed, which became, I think, a Benetton ad. It was on the cover of Newsweek. It was a very famous image in 1990. Berend, you give us something very different, what you call the sides of good and evil. The Locust family who had disowned Billy Boy, who show up and while he is dying, watch hockey, and the gaggle of gays who are there to support this dying man. I wondered, Berend, when you wrote this story and revisited those memories, what you wanted to say about family, and particularly about queer family, as you presented these different perspectives in your story.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that for so many of us back then, there was such shame, and we had the governments against us. We were being told that we deserved everything that we got. There was talk of putting us into concentration camps. I did a play about being called Beirut, which was about two HIV positive people in a concentration camp. So for us, we had to survive. And here in the streets of Edmonton, and then later in Vancouver, there was really that very loving family. We would see loving families, but more often, what in my experience, what I witnessed were families that came out that were ashamed of the gayness, and then when the AIDS and HIV came, they were completely disowned until the very end. And then they would sweep in and they would either pretend to be all up in the caring of the person that was dying, or they would sweep in and just decimate any of the person's belongings. It would be almost like they erased who the person was. And then we would be invited, if we were lucky enough to be invited into memorials and services. A lot of the times, not all the time, but a lot of the times, the services had nothing to do with the person that was dying. It had to do with the family and the rebuilding. Like AIDS was never, a lot of the time, never mentioned. Illness was never mentioned. Their lifestyle was never mentioned, and the people that cared about them throughout the illness and before the illness, the chosen family, were never mentioned. And I really, really did, like, while I was going through this and watching this like surreal like hockey game, and and then tears and mourning and crying and changing of diapers, and all the emaciated body and smell and all that stuff that came in, it just was, of course, this is the way it is. And of course, this is the way it was for us. And what I wanted to show with this story was really about how family is who we choose them to be. And family is not often family that we were born into or adopted into. Family is often with the people who know us the best, which is our community and the people that love us and have fun with us. So.
Thank you. Francisco, your self, I'm not sure whether to call them narrators or the voice in your story is in a bit of a different situation. He's an immigrant who has community. We have, thank God, those queens who gave us the VCR, but also there's isolation, and there's some real talk about, being in the bar he is in because of the exclusion of the richer, more mainstream bars. And so I'm wondering whether you want to reflect on how in your story or in your other work you represent both the connections that people have and some of the isolation that people have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Christy, the thing is, I'm 58 now, and time has a way of tempering and softening the edges and giving me perspective. So I think the perspective I have now is more accurate and than what I had then. But it also made sense that I would feel despondent, and because by all means, until 1996, we, that when they rolled out the antiretrovirals, we were doomed to die. That was clear to all of us. However, I never had family. I had a biological mother who was always in Chile, not here. And so I always made family. So that came natural to me. And then I decided that if I was going to die, I wanted to do something that I liked. And I've always liked the attention. I like the attention of men. I like the attention of students. And so I went into public service, right? So with a modicum of narcissism and ego, but it was absolutely thrilling. I have to say, my family were lesbians. Lesbians trained me academically, and my lesbian friends, sisters, still today, they come to bat out for me. And women, cis women, straight women, and healthcare providers. I have to say that because I had some sort of social capital, and I didn't look too Latino, I was very well taken care of. So that's that. And I think that what happened is I discovered a field that was super interesting, where people were doing all kinds of things in the name of AIDS politics, and I was thrilled. I was determined to die having fun and looking at the quirkiness and the humor in it. That's why I wrote for the new disease Pariah. That's why I wrote a lot of things out of sarcasm at that time. That's tempered now as well. But I had a lot of support. The people that I've never had too much support of, except for friends I recognize here, are gay men. Gay men were terribly scared at that time. I think we continue to be terribly scared. And gay men living with HIV were dealing with so much shit. Families would throw them out and all those kinds of things. So I never counted on them. I mean, I sought them to fuck. I decided I was not going to be asexual, that I wanted to have sex. And as you notice, and that protagonist in that story is HIV positive and fucks the Alberta hockey player, right? Basically infects him, right? So I was always interested in that edge. And so it's been just a different perspective on the same experience.
Thank you.
Sorry, Christy, I just wanted to sort of add, and it's funny how the parallels between the two stories. I mean, my 16-year-old self was bug chasing before bug chasing was coined. I was seeking commonality with this person that I was in love with and losing. And in my 16-year-old crazy brain, thought that somehow that this was a way for us to be connected. So I love that about these two stories, is that they're different, but there's a lot of similarities in them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also, I think that there's another piece of the time that a lot of the messaging suggested inevitability. It suggested that, so Francisco, I grew up the lesbian with the surrounded by gay men. And so my closest people were a community of gay men. And I know that for my peers, it was, what the media told them, what they thought, what their parents thought for sure, was that it was a matter of time, that their relationship with HIV was not if, but when. And so, I think that, Berend, I was really struck by that when I read your story of that earliest reference of being 16 and sort of maybe seeking the certainty. I think there's probably lots to that, but that was something that struck me. Francisco, I did something today that I didn't do before. I had read your story before, but today I read the whole issue of Disease Pariah News, which was published, I think, in 1999. And it is a fascinating, if for those history lovers in our community, or recipe lovers, because this issue shares this beautiful piece, among other pieces that are specifically sexual and about sexuality. An articles about navigating medical treatment, recipes, as I said, an article about when's the best time to sell your life insurance, and the articles about the deaths of the publication's co-founder and of its current editor, which were happening sort of right in the time. And so as I read both of your stories, I pictured these young people just surviving, just sort of taking in the violence of the world and finding connection, and unable to imagine a future. And so but you're the people I know. And I imagined, so I'd like to ask, what is it like revisiting these young people some 25 years later? And so I'd just love to know what it's like to reread these stories with what you know about your lives, your full, long lives. And I'm going to let you decide who wants to go first.
Oh, well, I'll go first. But there's a decision for you. So this is the thing. I mean, I look at that, the protagonists of my stories, and I've always put a little bit myself in them. I was then determined to live. It didn't matter so much whether it was a month, a year, or a decade, much less, I don't know, 3 decades now. I mean, I was diagnosed in 1986. So I look at that kid with great compassion, and makes me understand a lot of things, and makes me understand how repressed we still are as gay men, how much those people who like words like intersectionality and all that, how much we still divide ourselves in terms of class and stuff. And so I was very aware through those protagonists of who was the kind of man who wanted to fuck with me and have a relationship with me. And it certainly wasn't the A-gays. No worries, crowd. You're not A-gays. You wouldn't be here. We love you. And so, but they're A-gays. And so I think good for you. Good for you that you did all those things. You were insolent. You were risky. But I think it was a great time. Not that I'm bored now, but it made me do things that I realized now that you're inviting me to talk about this or read about this. For me, that is like, wow, thanks to that, little Latino cha-cha queen that I've been.
Thank you. Berend?
I was completely opposite. I ran away from home, from an abusive home where ran away to Edmonton and lived on the streets and lived as a woman for a number of years and couldn't find connection because I was in the gay bars. They wanted men, and I looked like a girl. I looked like Nona Hendricks. If you don't know her, look her up. I even had the same hairdo. And but I was just so desperate to be loved. I was so desperate to find the love that I saw on TV, on my TV screens. I thought that was what that's what I wanted. And then just as I was starting to find this family, suddenly they all started to die. And I went into trauma shock. I went into just, you get up every day and you just do the thing that you have to do in order to survive. You don't want to be at this dying friend's bedside because you'd rather just be drinking your face off, but you show up anyways drunk, right? Like I just did whatever it took in order to show up for life. And I was suicidal. I was suicidal all my life. And so this was like in my messed up 16-year-old brain, this was like, I thought we'd have sex, it would be loving, and he would give me the virus and we'd die next to each other. Like I had no clue. And my alcoholism at that point and my inability to think logically was completely stunted. And I lived like that for a long time. My alcoholism got worse. My drug addiction was out of control. And I was going to go out with a blaze. And when I was diagnosed, I was going to go out with a blaze of glory. I was going to go out having fun. And, as best as I tried, it never happened. And all I did was sink worse and worse and worse into addiction. And so when I look back at that kid that I'm writing about now, I have great empathy for that kid. I have great empathy for them. And I think I used to look at this time on shame, because after I asked him to have sex with me and his violent, like he was so violent the way he kicked me out of his house, and I was so confused. I used to carry that with a lot of shame, but I think writing this story has made me be able, and time and growth and sobriety and friendships and loves and success and failures, all that life experience that I have now that kid did not have, has made me look back and go, you're okay. You made the choice that you needed to make in order to survive. That choice that I made then is what got me to where I am today. So all I can say is thank you, little Berend, you messed up little fucker.
Is amen appropriate? It feels like an appropriate thing to say. Yes. I want to talk a little bit about hockey. I was looking up the historical moments. I wanted to figure out just when was the hockey riots. And so I Googled, and what I found was the hockey news list of significant hockey riots in Canada. Not an inclusive, exhaustive list, just the good ones, just the really big ones. And I thought this is a thing to know if people have stereotypes about Canada, of politeness and humbleness. There is also a part of us that has, an extensive list of hockey riots. So hockey is sort of a character in these stories. Both of your stories show how hockey and sometimes in some ways hockey and straight society get conflated a little bit. They get combined. They show how hockey and straight society endanger the narrator. In Francisco's story, when saddled with this very drunk hockey player, they're then insulted by a cab driver, and then the real fear and reality of the violence that this man might visit upon him as he sobers up. And also in that story, let's start with that one. There's two questions combined. In Berend's story, hockey is symbolic of uncaring in the family, and then of real danger, as later in the story, it's the night of the hockey riots in Vancouver. And so I'm wondering. So hockey in these stories is arrogant, it's violent, It's toxic. There's something about it in one of the stories that's appealing. So I would love it if you would be open, maybe I'll start with Berend this time, to talking a little bit about who's hockey in the story and who's hockey in your story. How does hockey show up in your life?
Sorry, I'm going to answer that question, but I don't know if we've lost Francisco. Have we lost him? We may have. I don't know. I don't see him. Anyways, I'll answer the story and hopefully he will jump back on or answer the question. Okay, so I hated hockey when I was a kid. I hated hockey. And when I hated it, and I was forced to play it because dad wanted like a hockey player or a football player, and he got me. And so he was gonna force me to hit that puck. In fact, I was the smallest person on the team and the most scared. And one day I freaked out, and that triggered my dad's homophobic, like, you acted like a girl. And I'm like, but I am one. And so, and he, you know, after he beat the crap out of me, he said, the next time we play, if you need to check and knock over the biggest guy on the team, otherwise you'll get punished. And so that's what my relationship with hockey was. My relationship with hockey was also, you know, we would watch Bugs Bunny on Sunday nights. And then it was always when the Coyote and the, what do you call it, Roadrunner came on that I knew the dread started. And I was like, oh my God, I have to pretend that I like this game. I have to pretend to know what a, you know, offside is. Is that a thing? You know, like what, you know, defense is, you know, and he'd quiz me. And of course, my asshole brothers who were all like, yeah, I was like, I was just a crapshoot. And then, so it just seems so weird that at this time, like I would enjoy hockey when the Oilers were winning. It was a chance for me to get drunk and hang out at the parade. So then hockey became this thing that I could turn into my own kind of fun and thing. And then when this happened this day, I mean, literally as we lift Billy Boy off the diaper and his head snaps back and he passes away, the family was on their feet cheering or screaming at the hockey game because they lost. And so, of course, I mean, of course, that's just the way it went. And then the anger I felt at these, like we get into the car and we're all just numb from the trauma. And then we get caught in this riot, and I'm like, I hated them. I hated every minute of them. And I have no patience for that bullshit. You know, I have no, like, you don't know what we just went through. We went to war tonight and we lost. We lost somebody. And you're out here fighting each other over a stupid piece of plastic. So it just, I don't know, the marriage is perfect.
Absolutely. You know, Ted wrote a great article this week for CBC about tonight and about hockey and the mystery of the names. And it was interesting because I was reflecting on my relationship with hockey, which is I was the one who got the pass that you were looking for, right? I was the girl child in a sporty household who got to get exempted from sports. And I would have told you that I didn't know anything about hockey until I started dating butches who played hockey. And I would go to the games and I actually could follow everything. And it was this like, oh, somehow through osmosis, I actually learned a lot about hockey. That was a big surprise to me. Now I am an aunt and an adult friend of kids who play hockey. And so I have this strange life that sometimes I'm in an arena where the coffee machine doesn't work, trying to figure out, like I'll take pictures of a child and then I'll realize that's not your nephew. Your nephew has the yellow socks, like, because they all look the same. So it's this, you know, this interesting thing to find myself in that world. Hockey Night in Canada is is several different things, right? It's and both of you have sort of talked about this. It is the broadcast, it's the theme song, it's sort of several different ways that we have this predominant mainstream culture. Francisco, I was wondering, I'd asked Berend about their relationship with hockey, their sort of childhood and adult relationship with hockey. You talked a little bit about attraction and the type of hockey players, but I'm really interested in knowing about your relationship with hockey, especially as somebody who I'm guessing did not grow up with it.
No, but I grew up with soccer. It's the same kind of near cult religious devotion. The devotion, though, what was fascinating for me, and it's all hockey is all about attraction, and I'm really happy that there's women playing hockey as well. But at the time was still very like a male thing. And what was interesting for me, and it's a bit of an academic point, and I know you threw a jab at social behavioral science, but it taught us a lot. And one of the things is that taking risks, right? We know that hockey players understand that they're taking risks. They go in the hockey rink. In fact, they can die, they can become stupid, a bunch of different accidents can happen. So in that respect, hockey was more powerful than soccer because it was more of someone's life on the edge. And it made a lot of sense for someone like me who decided to take risks. And the great difference was also interesting to me because we pay, we honor, we celebrate and exalt the lives of boxers and hockey players, but we've never done that about the prowess demonstrated by gay men in our kind of marathonic neoliberal fuck machine. Right? So all those things were very interesting. I was like, yeah, no, this is why I'm attracted to them, because it's so amazingly patriarchal, Roman patriarchal, that is fascinating still today. It makes no sense to me that people get paid millions to do that. And we love them, by the way. That's the thing, right? That's the thing we don't do with Kingsters, BDSMers, or with gay men in our sexuality. I mean, even the A-gays are against that. Just saying.
I want to talk about bravery and fear. One of the things that was really potent for me in your story, Francisco, is the idea that danger is everywhere. It is it's in the illness and the lesions, but it's also in unfiltered water and worry about food in the dive bar. Danger is in the cab, the possibility of calling the ambulance. Danger is definitely in this man who appears in your narrator's apartment.
Medically, strictly speaking, everything was dangerous.
And so in both of the stories, there is this hockey presence, which symbolizes a kind of supposed strength. And in both of the stories, what we see is the contrast of both of your characters or the voices of speaking characters of the stories, and the incredible courage that they are showing as they're living their life. The courage of taking this drunk guy home because somebody needs to do it, and knowing that there could be risk. The courage, Berend, in your story of the gaggle of gays facing the end of this loved person's life, while facing the scorn of the family who are ignoring what's going on. And I wonder about, I sort of just want to I want to stay with the theme that you raised there, Francisco, of the courage of gay men, of queer people, the courage of facing chronic illness and and organizing around it. And so I wonder, as you sort of look back at this work, how you see fear and risk and courage in your own stories or in the stories of the people around you.
Well, I think the thing is, fear and courage are the two sides of the same coin, right? We just learned, I'm working with my friend Kelly, who's here in the audience, and we just learned the phrase that fear is is courage without breathing, or something like that, right? So for me, both things have always been present. I've done most of the stuff that I've done of import that I didn't know had any import. Like, why would you pursue a PhD when you're about to die? I mean, that's utterly stupid. When other people would have gone in cruises and fucked their brains out, I did that, but in a more academic way. So for me, both things are always present. Still today, I find amazing that people say to me that you have the courage to do so that. Most of the time, I'm scared shitless, right? I feel like I'm gonna throw up, but I learn things like, if you really wanna, know about a place, or you get to a bar, they don't exist anymore, but at that time they did, you go to the most dangerous looking leather man who looks ferocious and there you have a sister, right? So I think both things operate all the time. I reject now more than I did before the idea that of having AIDS heroes and AIDS villains. I think people did what they could at that time. This is not to say that I appreciate the anti-vaxxers today, but I kind of get the idea, right? It comes kind of from the same source. Ignorance, fear, uncertainty.
Okay, thank you. Berend, when you think about courage, risk, fear, and thinking back about the idea of who we're supposed to think of as brave and strong, as opposed to the bravery and strength of these authentic people, I wonder what you were thinking of.
Well, fear has always been my main driver in life. It's always been my central core. Wetting the bed and being punished every evening, woken up every night and made to change the sheets, sleep deprived, smelling, all up until I was 16. Not thinking the same way that other kids thought. So there was fear about going to school and one more year of failure, one more year of punishment, and then leaving the house and fear of who I was, what my body was, who I was in my body, fear of fitting in. And then it went to, then AIDS hit, and it was the fear of AIDS and the fear of getting it. And then the screw it. There were parts of me that were like, I don't give a shit anymore. I would rather die than be here without these people. And then fear of being addicted and not being able to stop. And then the fear of getting sober and what that was going to be like. What I learned early on in my recovery and in my therapy that I went through for years and years and years around my HIV was the biggest gift I got was a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And this book is very small, and it literally says it's normal to feel fear. You will survive the fear. Walk through it, acknowledge it, know it's there, but at the other end of the fear that there could be a pot of gold at the other end of that. And I have lived that all ever since. I acknowledge that I'm in fear. And I think the difference between me now and me then is I didn't have that ability, because everything was precious. Everything was life and death. Everything was going to be taken away from me. And now what I'm learning is that that's not true. That and you know, as kids, as young as people, like you, as people, we all have to learn to deal with our lives and deal with this shit that comes our way. And so I don't see necessarily us as any different than anybody else. We either survived, we either took care of each other, and people like Francisco and I and others in this room and around the world, we either gave into the fear or we lived like nothing else mattered. And that's what we did. And that fear has it has lifted me through the rest of my life, because now I've lived through the absolute worst thing than watching my friend's neck break while we lifted him off his diaper. I can do life now, you know, sober, I can do life now. I couldn't do it then. I didn't know how, but I did it.
It is such a delight and an honor to be in conversation with both of you. I know we have a beautiful group of people in the room with us, not gays, as Francisco pointed out, the best people, and we are so thrilled to have all of you here. I'm wondering, I'd like to open this conversation up to conversation and questions. And so if there are people who have questions, we will invite you to raise your hand just so that we can identify you. And then I think Greg can unmute you. If you would prefer to put a question in the text, in the chat, Greg, I'm wondering if you could pick a couple of those out and read them out for us, if that would be all right. So join us in conversation, friends, and let us know what you're curious about, or what struck you from these beautiful readings tonight.
I think we could start it off. I have my sister had a question.
That's me.
You're on
yes, I do. By the two readings, I was struck by the anger and the desire to infect at that time. And I wonder how that has morphed over the decades, what that anger turned into as you evolved, as you grew as people, and where Hockey Night in Canada is today for you. What do you say to that?
Thanks, Michelle.
I'll take that one because it's Michelle. Okay, I have to tell everybody here, and I'm not lying, and if I can find a picture, I look like our father when I look like our father, almost like to a T, and I look like my sister in drag. Like, I swear to God, I swear, I'll find a picture. I think that I was angry. I was angry when this was happening. We were being told that we did not deserve to live. We were told that we were expendable and that we deserved everything that came our way. We were human beings where our governments turned against us and told us that we did not matter. We made each other matter to ourselves. And I think for me, that has shifted from rage and anger to I'm here. Like, my story goes from, when I'm 16, jumps to 1994, and then jumps to he's getting on a plane during COVID. It shows that I am still here. And I don't think I would be alive today if I held on to all that rage and anger. And because I write the rage and anger, it doesn't mean that I feel that. A lot of my writing is about working through who I was and who I am, and seeing myself from an outside point of view. And that's kind of what this is. I don't hate hockey. I mean, congratulations. You like hockey? Great. Not my thing. I'm all about, Succession and Game of Thrones, whatever your thing is. it's allowed me, moving through it has been sort of why I am here today, because I know as an alcoholic and as somebody that struggled through addiction, that holding on to that resentment and anger was killing me. Thanks for the question, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. That was very powerful. So not a whole lot to add. I think anger is just one of the the elements or the tools that we have to live our lives. And I feel just as angry as I was at that time about a number of things. I feel angry that there's still such huge divisions among gay men. I feel angry about the A gays, lots of resentment. But you know what? There's a poor. They've done nothing to me, right? I mean, they're just themselves, rich and fabulous. I hate them, right? So I'm angry about a lot of things. But the thing is, with age, you start using it in a particular way. So I do have my moments, my in which I explode. But yeah, no, I think it's a good fuel, as Berend has mentioned. It helps you move forward. And there are ways in which you can, I learned through the pain of being a patient that pain is a fantastic, tool, and I became a Kingster and BDSM practitioner. I mean, those things are, you got to be angry to be hitting someone else, but at the same time, you got to be incredibly loving. Right, but it's understanding the anger, what I think has changed. I have a much better, I'm not perfect, certainly not, but a much better understanding. I like it. It's a good tool.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Michelle, for that question. Are there any other folks who have a question or a comment that they want to share? Go, Berend, go ahead. Unmute. Berend, you're muted, which makes me feel so much better, because when we started talking today, I was muted and Berend was helping me. Thanks. You're muted again.
Okay. Is that it? Okay, good. Okay, I was saying I can see this question and it's in the chat. So it's interesting in that hockey is not the central theme. It's the backdrop to a much deeper, more personal story. Oh, this is from Robert, by the way. Did you both write these stories using the hockey title to gain attention originally? I know that sounds awful, but the story itself is not exactly what I thought it would be about. But I do understand it is an integral part to play. I happened to grow up as a hockey player in Saskatchewan, so the topic caught my attention right away.
Oh, I want to see how Robert Duncan looks like.
Oh,
Yeah.
careful! Run, Robert, run.
Sorry, another. Yeah.
Okay, so Robert, apparently this is show and tell. If you want to turn your camera on, you're very welcome to.
Absolutely. So my question, I have a question to counter that, because what writer writes titles not to be seen? Like, really?
Yeah.
If I could, write a book and it would be like fuck, 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 and then fuck, fuck, fuck 2, and then fuck, fuck, fuck 3, I would, right? Because aren't we in the business of showing what we do? So yeah, yes, I did it to gain attention, but I love hockey. I think it's an amazing, I said it before, Roman sport. It's violent, it's patriarchal, it's all those things. I mean, who wouldn't like it?
Okay, and Berend?
Well, and titles are very important to me. Titles, I mean, I have a show called Nigger Fag. It's a children's show that I've performed for 5 years across Canada and into Europe. Titles are a way to tell the story. And hockey is the backdrop to AIDS in both of our stories. It is a character. it is it to the point where you know, he dies while a score is being won, to, you know, us being trapped amongst hockey players, to then getting on a plane and a woman beside him being very upset that the playoffs were not being done, right? Like, so I I mean, whatever you use a title for, whether it's to sell, I mean, I want people to read this, yes, but it wasn't chosen because I wanted, I mean, I encourage you to read the stories. And if you read the stories, I think you will understand why both of us used Hockey Night in Canada.
I want a question from Anthony Santiago because he looks hot in that photo. And a question from Greg Newton as well because he'll be mortified, but he's very cute. Go for it. Ask us something. Come on, Anthony, you can do it. That face, man.
It's okay. Anthony's my friend from college. Thank you so much for coming, Anthony. You don't have to speak if you don't want to.
Why is everybody protecting them from me? You ask a dear God. Things have not changed. Greg, you have a question.
That's okay.
Well, I'll ask you what you're both working on now.
Oh my God, thank you. What a fabulous moment. We'll send the money after. So I'm working on a book that is a retelling of Saint Sebastian's death. And as you know, Saint Sebastian is an icon of gays, sort of like Cher, but old. And he's always portrayed as gorgeous, ripped, and beautiful, long hair, and attached to a tree. I mean, who has not been attached to a tree in a park, Central Park? And then he is killed with these arrows. It turns out that Saint Sebastian does not die. You know, he had to be clubbed to death. So it was a very tough queen, right? Una loca dura, right? And so the retelling is we find Saint Sebastian just as beautiful, blonde, all, you know, our gay fantasy, but he is an influencer, of course, and he is a drug user. So the arrows are replaced by needles, but many things happen in between in which they create a bit of a cult. And at the moment, I have a dear friend of mine who is actually editing it. So, and I think I won't try to publish because it's too much work, but I'll bring you a copy, Greg, when I come to New York. It'll be a vanity publishing because I'm too old to be asking for people. Not to mention that Canadians have never published me, except for Arsenal Pulp Press once. The rest of the time they find it a little bit too much. But you American sisters and brothers are good to me. So, and hello to Sarah Chown that is on the crowd as well.
What am I working on? What am I
Yeah,
not?
what are you working on? Yeah.
I started writing a novel in March or in January of this year. So I'm about 7 chapters into that. And right now it's called Adopted, and it's an auto fiction novel about the abuse I lived through as a kid. Really happy reading. So, you know, I always write really happy stuff. This summer, I was inducted into this thing called the Warner Media Global Access Writing Academy, and it is a partial development deal with Warner Media, which owns Warner Pictures and HBO, and it's a BIPOC initiative for anybody on the margins of this world of entertainment, and I got chosen. So I just finished writing my very first TV pilot called Angry Little Black Man. And that one's a little funnier. So it's not so like you don't want to jump off a bridge necessarily after reading that one. And I am also in a BIPOC theater fellowship with Catalyst Theater. It's called Confluence is the fellowship. And along with doing some mentoring on their behalf in some of the universities here in town, I am writing a musical called In the Center, and it's based on my friend Eduardo, who passed away in in March of this year from AIDS complications, Kaposi sarcoma, which we all thought was eradicated. He went to the Dr. Peter Center, and I've always wanted to write a story, a musical about the inner workings of the Dr. Peter Center. So it's called In the Center. And that's about all I'm doing.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. I wanted to point out, Berend, if my memory serves me correctly, you did have a puppet show called Get Off the Cross, Mary at some point. So, you know, you do have range in your, I don't remember that one being, I don't remember the puppets crying, but it's wonderful. Well, I hope, Francisco, that we'll be able to access that story. And Berend, I know I and so many people here are so thrilled with the way that your work is getting recognition and opportunity. It is so deeply deserved.
Thank you.
And so this is an event, we're concluding and we're wrapping up our time here. This is an event that sort of is wrapping up a week of events around World AIDS Day. And one of the things that we try to do with the What Would an HIV Doula Do collective is to make sure that histories and stories about HIV/AIDS are not oversimplified or do not center the wrong people. The people that Francisco has called the A-gays, or that media often depicts as the middle-class white gay who happens to throw the first stone in Stonewall, those kinds of tellings. And so as we're talking about these stories tonight, we've talked a little bit about the future and about the past. I'm wondering about, sorry, I'm struggling with my question a little bit. I'm wondering about what about HIV/AIDS do you want the people listening to know? What about the complexity of that story do you want your readers or viewers tonight to know as we reflect on World AIDS Day and this annual observation?
Berend,
Go ahead, please.
Well, I want people to know many things, right? That's why I'm a researcher, and it is very complex, but I think it's also very human altogether, right? I mean, we all go through all kinds of different troubles and ups and downs in life. So yeah, that I want people to know that there's incredible inequity still, particularly in the global South. I mean, we're seeing that with COVID-19 and vaccination. I mean, the same thing continues to happen. And it's amazing. So it's part of a larger, now I'm being too philosophical, kind of neoliberal system that is very hard to dismantle, etc., all of that. I'm a little bit disappointed that nobody asked me how it is to actually fuck a hockey player. But I guess it's not that important. It is really good. And they have an ass that you would die for, to have, to eat, to fuck. It's still today. Just saying.
I apologize for not asking what is obviously the question on everyone's mind. Francisco, thank you for stepping in and answering it. Berend, you can either answer my earlier question or you can elaborate on hockey players. Like, I guess I'm going to give you your choice.
I will not. I am so glad that he had that opportunity. I pray that I get that opportunity one day. And what I want people to know about the AIDS pandemic. It was horrific. It was traumatic. It was infuriating. It was rage-filled. It was full of tears. It happened. We're here. We're talking about it. There's hope after it. There is a new crop of books now suddenly, my friend Rob Hamilton wrote a lovely book called Our Story, coming out in the time of HIV and AIDS. And he is writing about Joe Boy or Billy Boy, the same character in he was Tom in my story. So he wrote this book. And then there's All the Rage by Brad Fraser. And I think that what happened during the pandemic for us was after a while, nobody wanted to talk about it. I didn't want to hear one more thing about AIDS. I didn't want to see one more sad movie with lesions. I didn't want to hear one more thing about blood and all that stuff. I just wanted to try to survive. And now we're here and now we're sharing our stories. And it's important because we forget what it was like. And the new kids coming up today, they don't know what it was like because all they do now is take a pill and it's gone. So we need people to remember. And I'm so grateful for people like Francisco who have the courage to share so honestly and openly and with humor and fun and sex and all that stuff. Like, we need all of the stories. So if you're new, if you want to write and you want to write your HIV/AIDS story or any story, just get it done, because nobody's going to tell your story except for you.
I would like to thank Ted Kerr, Greg from the Bureau of General Services Queer Edition. I'd like to thank Berend McKenzie. I'd like to thank Francisco Ibanez Carrasco. I'd like to thank all of you for spending this evening with us. I've been so looking forward to it, and I'm so inspired by and in love with your work. So thank you all so much for being here. This will be posted to YouTube, and so it will be findable. Greg, where will they be able to find it? Whose feed will it be on?
It will be on the Bureau's YouTube channel. So if I can post that right quick if you hold on 1 second. Or you can just do a search for BGSQD. That's probably better. Is just do a little search for the Bureau on YouTube and you'll find us. Nobody else has the name Bureau of General Services Queer Division, so you'll find it.
Okay.
But
Thank you,
I'll also
Greg,
share
so
it.
much. Wonderful. Thanks everyone for being here. We're so grateful. Take good care.
Thank you, Christy.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you all. Have a good night.